let us have the introduction about gene therapy. Gene therapy is the introduction of genes into existing cells to prevent or cure the wide range of disease. It is a technique for correcting defective genes responsible for disease development. For instance, you have a defective genes, and so you are prone to any kind of disease. In order for you to avoid that disease, you need to undergo gene therapy so that your defective genes will be cured. What really is a gene therapy? It is an experimental technique for correcting defective genes that are responsible for disease development. This typically involves the transfer and expression of a therapeutic gene. With gene therapy, doctors deliver a healthy copy of a gene to cell inside the body. This healthy gene may replace a damaged or mutated gene, inactivate a mutated gene, or introduce an entirely new gene. Carriers called vectors transport these healthy genes into cells. Next, we have the advantages and the disadvantages of gene therapy. First, let us have the advantages. First, it gives a chance of a normal life to baby born with genetic disease. Next, it gives hope of healthy life to cancer patient. For certain diseases that do not have any cure except gene therapy, it could save many lives. Enhancement of immune reaction. If ever you undergo gene therapy, it is also another way of having another chance to live normally. And now let's proceed to disadvantages of gene therapy. First, the cost is very high and the patient might need an insurance to cover the treatment. So as expected, it is a very expensive treatment. Next, the genetic testing, screening, and research in finding the availability of certain gene is very controversial. May increase rate of abortion if prenatal test regarding baby with genetic disease is done. So sometimes when people find out that their baby has a genetic disease, they may end up to abortion because maybe they cannot accept the fact that their baby will suffer to a disease.
The advantages and disadvantages of gene therapy. So the advantages of a gene therapy, it gives a chance of a normal life to a baby born with a genetic disease. It gives hope of a healthy life to a cancer patient. For a certain disease that do not have any cure except gene therapy, it could save many lives. And enhancement of immune system. And now the disadvantage of gene therapy. The cost is very high and the patient might need an insurance to cover the treatment. The genetic testing, screening, and research in finding the availability of certain gene is very controversial and may increase rate of abortion if prenatal test regarding baby with genetic disease is done. So we are probably noticing that gene therapy is pretty complicated, but it is exciting too. It has the potential to be a life-changing for people with a rare genetic disease, cancer, and more. But like all the medical treatments, there are positive and negative aspects to using gene therapy. It's always important to weigh the risks and the benefits of any medical treatment.
These are examples of disease caused by genetic effect: ornithine transcarbamylase or OTC deficiency, hemophilia blood coagulation factors 8 or 11, SCID severe combined immunodeficiency, muscular dystrophy, cystic fibrosis, or sickle cell anemia.
Types of gene therapy. first is germline therapy. So it results in permanent changes, potential for offering a permanent therapeutic effects for all who inherit the target gene, possibility of eliminating some disease from a particular family. So how does germline therapy work? So germline therapy is when DNA is transferred into the cells that produce reproductive cells, eggs or sperm in the body. The second type of gene therapy is the somatic gene therapy. It affects only the target cells in the patients and it is not passed to the future generations. Short-lived because the cells of most tissues ultimately die and replace another cells. Transporting the gene to the target cells or tissues is also problematic. So this slide illustrates how germline gene therapy works. So for germline, from gene therapy down to embryo to human, so all cells are targeted, including germline cells. How is somatic gene therapy works? Somatic gene therapy transfer is carried out by three methods such as in vivo, in situ, and ex vivo. In vivo is the insertion of functioning genes directly to the human body through the bloodstream. And in somatic gene therapy, it starts from embryo down to human. Then the gene therapy, so the somatic cells are targeted, not germline cells.
Gene therapy approaches. There are two types of gene therapy approaches. These are in vivo approaches and ex vivo approaches. First, let us have the in vivo approaches. This is the direct delivery of genes into the cells of particular tissue in the body. In vivo gene therapy works through the help of vector, which directly inserts functional copies of a gene into target cells to treat a mutated or missing gene. However, in ex vivo approaches, this is the transfer of genes to cultured cells and reinsertion. Ex vivo gene therapy works by genetically modifying a patient's stem cells, which then replace target cells that have a missing or malfunctioning gene. Let us have the in vivo gene therapy. This is the direct delivery of therapeutic gene into target cell into patient's body, carried out by viral or non-viral vector systems. It can be possible option in patients where individual cells cannot be cultured in vitro in sufficient numbers. In vivo gene transfer is necessary when cultured cells cannot be reimplanted in patients effectively.
5 examples of vivo gene therapy. Isolate cells with genetic defect from a patient down to the grow the cells in culture. Introduce the chiropathic genes. Select genetically corrected cells and grows and it becomes a transplant the modified cells to the patient. Bacterium carrying plasmid with clone normal human antigen and genetically disabled retrovirus. Clone antigen is incorporated into virus. T cells with disabled antigen isolated from SCID patient down to retrovirus effect. T cells transfers antigen to cells and it comes as cells are grown in culture to ensure antigen is active. And it becomes a genetically altered cells are reimplanted produce AD or it become a baby.
Delivery strategies used for gene therapy directly targeting tumor cells or tumor microenvironment components. Their major advantages preceded by a green check mark and disadvantages preceded by a red cross. So first, the advantages of in vivo gene therapy. It is less invasive procedure and directly tackle proliferative tumor cells to inhibit cell division. Next is disadvantages of in vivo gene therapy. it is required the targeting of tumor cells and possible immune responses to gene vectors. So next is the advantages of ex vivo gene therapy. Selection of target cells and immunocompatibility or autologous cells. And the disadvantages of ex vivo gene therapy is requires an invasive procedure for solid tumors. Non-proliferative altered tumor cells will not outgrow over highly proliferative tumor cells. So in addition, in vivo gene therapy benefits from its simplicity and reduced volume of materials introduced into the brain. These properties make it an ideal method when the target is specific small area of the brain. Disadvantages of in vivo gene transfer are the possibility of the introduction and expression of virus proteins may activate endogenous pathogenic viruses. And the major advantage of ex vivo gene therapy is that the expression of the gene and health of the transfected cells can be verified before it is introduced to the patient. This method can be useful for the therapist where compound should be released or expressed by specific cell types that can be selected on the culture dish before transplant. At this time, the disadvantages drawbacks include the sparse transplantation, low survival rates of grafted cells, potential for migration and proliferation.
Vectors in gene therapy. To transfer the desired gene into a target cell, a carrier is required. Such vehicles of gene delivery are known as vectors, and it has two main classes, the viral sectors and non-viral sectors. Viral sector includes, first, retrovirus sector system, which is the recombinant retroviruses have the ability to integrate into the host's genome in a stable fashion, can carry a DNA of size less than 3 to 4 kilobytes, replication defective virus particles, target cells dividing. Second is the adenovirus vector system, adenovirus with a DNA genome good vectors, target non-dividing human cell, common called adenovirus. The third is adeno-associated virus vector. It is a human virus that can integrate into chromosome 19. It is a single-stranded, non-pathogenic small DNA virus. AAV enters host cells, becomes double-stranded and gets integrated into chromosome. And the last is the herpes simplex virus vector, viruses which have natural tendency to infect a particular type of cell. They infect and persist in nervous cells.
The non-viral sector, it composed of pure DNA construct, leukoplexes, human artificial chromosome, and DNA molecular conjugates. In pure DNA construct, it direct introduction of pure DNA construct into target tissues and efficiency of DNA uptake by cells and expression rather than low. So in lipoplexes, lipid DNA complexes DNA construct surrounded by artificial lipid layer and most of it degraded by lysosomes. Human artificial chromosomes, it avoids lysosomal breakdown of DNA. And therapeutic DNA is then made to combine with a conjugate to form a complex. And last is DNA molecular conjugates. Can carry a large DNA with one or more therapeutic genes with regular elements.
The therapeutic environment or milieu. So when we say therapeutic environment, it may refer to physical, social and psychological safe spaces that are specifically designed to be healing. But most often, the term therapeutic environment refers to a physical space that is set up to allow individuals to work through and overcome medical issues. So we have physical and psychological. In psychological, it has structure and relationships. The one practice that a CYW draws on consistently in their work is that of therapeutic milieu or environment. An environment that fosters healthy relationship building, consistency, and structure is key to working with troubled children and youth.
Next slide, we have the topic of the dimensions of the therapeutic environment. First, we have the relationship dimension. So, in relationship dimension, the foundation of the work with the youth, relationship serves as means of behavioral intervention. It builds asset in the youth. It has a direct impact on personal development. It encourages the cornerstone of an effective relationship and has the encouragement to reinforce effort as well as outcome. For example, staff to the staff, staff to the youth, and youth to the youth. Wherein through the implementation of having relationship dimension, it creates and improves our social interaction to the community, which is very essential to train ourselves to communicate with other people, motivate ourselves and to others to make us more resilient to the stress factors. Some researchers conducted that through having interaction with others enhance our brain memory formation to recall and protect the brain from the neurodegenerative diseases.
Dimension of therapeutic environment. Personal development dimension. Under this, encourage potential, an environment that supports growth, awareness of, and support to meet developmental tasks, goal orientation, strength-based approach. Encourage potential. Throughout the process, it is essential to encourage, empower, and energize in order to finally evaluate the full potential on that certain place. Next, an environment that supports growth. This means in which the environment that supports growth not just for the environment but also to those people who live in a certain place, wherein will provide information and ways to create environments and experiences that supports ongoing infant and toddler physical growth and development. Awareness of and support to meet development tasks. As people, we must be aware of what is happening in our surrounding, and also must support to meet the development or the improvement of a certain task in which leads to successful and well-improved tasks. Goal orientation. Goal orientation is the achievement orientation is an individual disposition towards developing or validating one's ability. It is focused on reaching a specific objective or accomplishing a given task driven by a purpose. Strength-based approach or strength-based is approach focused on individual strengths including the personal strength, social and community networks, and not their deficits. Strength-based practice is a holistic and multidisciplinary and works with an individual to promote their well-being. Thank you.
The third dimensions of therapeutic environment is system maintenance and change dimension. It includes appearance, order, routine, and structure, daily expectations, staff versus resident control, responsiveness to change, management of client movement, short-term placements, and the issue of turnover, burnout, and its consequences. The fourth dimension of therapeutic environment is the systems of discipline. First, emotional neutrality. It is the concept of removing greed, fear, and other human emotions from financial or investment decisions, followed by encouragement. It is the act of giving someone support, confidence, or hope. Lastly, logical consequences. It is a fundamental concept in logic, which describes the relationship between statements that hold true when one statement logically follows from one or more statements.
Climate change and global warming. Protests around the world, headlines about extreme weather events, scientists and public figures calling for action, and the government uniting in the search for solution. Climate change is a global issue and we must work together to save our world. But what exactly is climate change? So climate change is a long-term process that occurs over a large area and is measured over a long period of time. It is also the average of many years of weather observation. Weather is a short-term change of temperature. So there are two factors that affect in climate change, the abiotic and the biotic factors. Abiotic factors which affect climate are latitude, altitude, ocean current, topography, solar radiation, evaporation, and the volcanic activities, while biotic factors that affect climate are transpiration, respiration, photosynthesis, digestion, and decomposition.
Effects of climate change. The Earth is getting warmer and warmer, resulting in changes that we can see. These are the effects of climate change. Glaciers and ice caps are melting due to the rising temperatures of the Earth. This leads to rising sea levels. Animals such as bears will become extinct because the glaciers are melting and they cannot live inland. Global warming. Global warming is an average increase in the temperature of the atmosphere near the Earth's surface. It contributes to changes in global climate patterns. Global warming is also the rise of the average temperature of Earth's atmosphere and the oceans.
Already know what is global warming, so let's go now to the causes of global warming. So these are the following that causes the global warming. The burning of fossil fuels such as coal to generate electricity in power plants. So kanang the large volumes of carbon dioxide which release sa atmosphere when fossil fuels are burned. So ang kana siya nga aso is ginatawag na greenhouse gas, which kanang really result into the global warming. Kay ang kaning the global warming is a result of greenhouse gases man, which kanang ability niya is to trap heat in our atmosphere. So the second one is the transportation fuels such as LPG, kerosene, and fuel oil. So since we are very familiar to this kay atong sa ning ginagamit, so ang kaning mga transportation na mga vehicle like kaning pong mga highway vehicles. So according to the study that I read, kay ang highway vehicles release about 1.6 billion tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere each year, mostly in the form of carbon dioxide, contributing to global climate change. Kana bang aso gani sa mga sakyanan, kana ato ang mga vehicles natong gipanggamit karon, kana mga jeep ing ana kay dako jud gani siya og kanang contribute sa pagsaka sa ato ang global climate change. So next is industrial process such as manufacturing of cement, steel, and aluminum. So the emissions from kana ba mga manufacturing and industry are mostly the result of burning fossil fuels to create the energy necessary sa pag-produce goods like kanang mga semento, kanang steel, electronics, plastics, clothing, and ana ug unsa pa na diha. So of course ang katong mga gipanggamit ato sa paghimo, of course ma-turn into gases na siya which are released during the kanang industrial operations inana. So dako jud kayo siya og kanang dako pud siya og contribution sa global warming. So next is other greenhouse gases emissions such as forestry, agriculture, and waste management. So of course ang kaning sa mga waste management kuno kay ang uban biya kanang syempre kanang ubang tao kay kanang manguan ilang sunugon ang mga plastic na mga hugaw kay syempre dili pud siya malata inana. So of course ang kanaiyahang aso dako jud kay siya og kuha sa global warming nato. So next is deforestation causes global warming. So since we already know what is deforestation, so mo ni siya ang kanang pag-cut down sa trees para sa mga pag-develop sa area like sa kanang mga bukid-bukid, like sunugon nila ang usa ka kanang lugar para himuon og subdivision in ana. Of course dako jud kayo siya guan kay ang aso niya ma-trap dito sa babaw. So the massive deforestation could lead to less carbon dioxide being absorbed and causing much more of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So no kanang grabe na jud kayo ang ato ang panahon karon, ato ang pag-climate change cause man na sa global warming good kay ang ubang tao kay very abusive sa ato ang kuan, like they didn't think jud sa mga possible na consequences sa kipambuhat nila for para sa ilahan na sila ilahang rason. So that's all.